The light in the hallway. It was a quiet night in the hills above Los Angeles. The kind of night where the wind barely moved the trees, and the moonlight touched everything like silver lace. Inside a modern house built from glass and stone, the lights were off and everything was still. Keanu Reeves was home. After a long day on set, all he wanted was rest. His boots were by the door, his phone on silent and his jacket tossed over the chair. He moved through the house slowly, letting the silence wrap around him like a blanket. He had always loved silence. Not just the kind that filled rooms, but the kind that lived inside people. The quiet moments when no one was watching, when the world faded away and all that remained was thought. He passed the kitchen, grabbed a glass of water, and started toward the bedroom. But just as he reached the hallway, something caught his eye. A faint light, barely there, coming from the small room near the back. The guest room, the one that had been turned into storage. He frowned. At this hour, there should be no one awake. He walked toward it softly, careful not to startle anyone. The door was slightly open, and as he peeked inside, what he saw made him stop cold. A young woman sat at a small table, hunched over a stack of books. A lamp lit the papers around her. Her eyes moved quickly as she read, lips pressed together, in concentration. It was Emilia, his maid. She was supposed to be off hours ago. He hadn't even known she was still here. Keanu stood there, watching silently, unsure what to say. She hadn't noticed him. Not yet. Her world was wrapped in ink and words and quiet determination. But there was something else, a kind of desperation in her movements. Not fear, not sadness, something deeper, urgency. He knocked gently on the doorframe. Emilia jumped. She turned quickly, eyes wide, mouth open in shock. "Sir," she gasped, standing up so fast the chair nearly fell over. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean—" "It's okay," Keanu said, stepping inside. "I didn't know you were still here." She looked down, hands shaking slightly. I was just studying. I didn't want to leave yet." He looked at the books, old textbooks, handwritten notes, printed practice exams. One of them said, English proficiency test. He met her eyes. "Studying at 2 in the morning?" She nodded slowly. The house was quiet. I didn't want to disturb anyone. "You're not disturbing anyone," he said gently. "But why here? Why not go home?" Emilia hesitated. Then she spoke in a low voice. "My home. It's small and noisy. My uncle drinks, and my cousin plays music all night. I can't think there, but here. It's peaceful." Keanu sat down slowly across from her. "How long have you been studying like this?" Emilia looked away. "Months. Every night after work. I sleep 2, maybe 3 hours." He didn't say anything at first. Then he asked, "What are you studying for?" She swallowed hard. "I want to take the college entrance exam. I want to be a teacher one day." He nodded. "Have you told anyone?" "No," she said quickly. "No one would understand. They'd think I'm wasting time, or trying to be something I'm not." "And what do you think?" She looked at him, surprised. I think I have to try." Keanu leaned back, his eyes soft. "I think you're right." The next day, something changed. Emilia arrived at work to find a new desk in the corner of the guest room. Not fancy, just simple and neat. On top of it was a better lamp, a new set of notebooks, and a small card. "Keep studying. I believe in you." No name. No signature. But she knew who it was from. Keanu didn't mention it. Not that day. Not the next. He didn't make a speech. He didn't ask questions. He just nodded when she passed him in the hall. And in that silence, something new began to grow. Respect. But not everyone in the house noticed quietly. One of the security staff, a man named Ron, began to watch Emilia more closely. He was older, strict, always by the book. He didn't like things outside routine. And when he saw the books and the late nights, he frowned. "This isn't a school," he said one morning. "You're here to clean, not to read." Emilia kept her head down. "Yes, sir." But Keanu overheard, and later that evening he called Ron aside. "She's working hard," Keanu said. "Let her be." Ron shook his head. "With respect, Mr. Reeves, it's not normal. She's using your space, your electricity, your time." Keanu looked at him. "So what?" Ron didn't answer. Keanu continued. "Some people spend their whole lives looking for a chance. Others are born with them and throw them away. She's asking for space, not favors. And if she wants to study here, she can." Ron nodded slowly. "As you wish." Emilia kept studying. Every night. And Keanu kept watching from a distance. Once, he left a set of English novels on the desk with a note. "Stories are the best way to learn a language." Another time, he brought her tea and didn't say a word. And slowly, something happened. Her English got better. Her notes grew sharper. Her eyes, once tired, began to shine. One night, Keanu saw her asleep at the desk, cheek pressed to an open book. He didn't wake her. He just placed a blanket over her shoulders and turned off the main light. He stood there for a long time thinking about how many people dream quietly, how many carry hope in silence, and how sometimes the kindest thing you can do is believe in someone without needing anything back. 2 weeks later, Emilia came into the kitchen holding an envelope. Her hands were shaking. Keanu was pouring coffee. She walked up to him, tears in her eyes. "I passed," she whispered. He looked at her. "The test?" She nodded, unable to speak. He smiled. Not big, not loud. Just a quiet, deep smile. "I'm proud of you," he said. And in that moment, she broke. She cried like someone who had held back too long. He didn't say anything more. He just handed her a tissue and waited. But this was only the beginning, because behind her test result was another problem. Her visa, it was expiring soon, and without a valid reason to stay, she'd have to leave before the semester even began. Keanu found out a few days later. She hadn't told him. He overheard her talking to the cook. "I don't know what to do," she said. "If I leave, everything's gone." That night, he called his lawyer. Then he called the university. Then he made a quiet decision. The next morning, Emilia received a letter. Inside was a scholarship, fully funded, with housing and a signed recommendation from Keanu Reeves himself. She stood frozen, holding the paper, her eyes wide. He walked by casually and said, "Now you have no excuse." Emilia couldn't speak. She just nodded, tears falling silently. Because sometimes the most powerful words are the ones you never have to say out loud. The door he left open. Emilia sat on her small bed in the guest room, holding the scholarship letter with trembling fingers. She had read it at least 20 times, and still her brain could barely believe it. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the official seal of the university. It was the part at the bottom, written in neat handwriting. "She is one of the most dedicated and disciplined individuals I have ever encountered. She has earned this opportunity, and I stand behind her with full confidence. Keanu Reeves, no." One had ever written something like that about her before. Not her teachers, not her family, not even herself. That night, she didn't study. She just sat there in silence, feeling a strange mix of joy and fear, because even though the door was now open, walking through it meant leaving everything behind, leaving safety, leaving the house that had become her shelter, and maybe leaving the one person who saw her. The next morning, she tried to return to normal. She cleaned the windows. She folded laundry. She swept the floors. But her mind was far away, floating between her dream and the quiet sadness that came with it. Keanu noticed. He didn't say anything right away, but he watched her from the kitchen as she wiped the counter twice without realizing it was already clean. Finally, as she passed by him with a basket of towels, he asked gently, "Do you have a minute?" She nodded and followed him out to the garden. They sat on a stone bench under the olive tree. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he asked, "Why haven't you smiled since the letter?" She looked down. I'm afraid." "Of what?" "Of leaving." He nodded as if he expected that. You know, he said, when I was younger, I didn't feel like I belonged anywhere. I moved a lot, lost people I loved. Sometimes, the only place I felt safe was on a movie set. Not because of the cameras, but because it felt like a world I could control. Emilia looked at him, surprised by how open he was being. But eventually, he continued, I realized you can't live in safe places forever. Sometimes you have to walk through doors even if your hands are shaking. She didn't reply. You're not leaving behind everything, he said. Some things stay with you. Courage, memory, and the people who believe in you. Like you? He smiled softly. Especially me. The following week was filled with preparation. Emilia filed documents, packed her things, said goodbye to the staff who had become like a second family. But one person she hadn't spoken to yet was Ron. He still didn't trust her. He still gave her cold looks and short words. But on her last day in the house, as she stood in the hallway holding a small box of her belongings, Ron approached her. His arms were crossed, his voice low. I was wrong, he said. She blinked. About you, he added. Thank you, she said gently. Then, to her surprise, he reached into his pocket and handed her a small silver key. It's for the staff gate, he said. In case you ever need to come back. She held it tightly. Thank you, she whispered again. Keanu drove her to the university himself, not in a flashy car, just an old SUV. Windows rolled down, music playing softly. On the way there, they talked about simple things, books, weather, how strange it felt to start over. As they neared the campus, Emilia grew quiet. Keanu noticed. What's on your mind, he asked. What if I fail, she said. He looked at her, his eyes steady. Then you'll try again. And what if I'm not enough? Then you'll learn and grow, and one day you'll look back and see how far you've come. She stared out the window. I wish my mother could see this. He placed a hand gently on her shoulder. She would be proud. So proud. They arrived at the dorms just after sunset. The air was cool, filled with the smell of fresh-cut grass and warm concrete. Students moved around with backpacks and coffee cups, their voices soft and full of energy. Keanu helped carry her box inside. The room was small but clean, a single bed, a desk, a window overlooking the campus lawn. Not as fancy as your last room, he joked. But it's mine, she said with a quiet smile. He placed the box on the desk, then turned to leave. But before he reached the door, Emilia called out, Wait. He turned. She walked over and hugged him. Tight. Thank you, she whispered into his shoulder. For everything. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he whispered back, Go change the world, Emilia. The next few weeks flew by. University. Life was harder than she imagined. Classes were intense, her English was still shaky, and some students looked at her like she didn't belong. But she remembered his words. Try again, learn, grow. And so she did. She asked questions. She stayed after lectures. She studied harder than ever before, and slowly, things began to change. Her grades improved. Her confidence grew. And she made 2 friends, an exchange student from Brazil named Clara, and a quiet boy from India named Aman. They became her new family. One night, around 2 a.m, Clara found her in the common room, asleep over her notebook. Clara shook her gently. Emilia, come to bed. I was reviewing for tomorrow, Emilia mumbled, half asleep. Clara smiled. You work harder than anyone I know. Emilia blinked slowly. Someone once told me, she said, that even shaking hands can open doors. Then she fell asleep again. Back at Keanu's house, things were quieter now. He missed her presence. Not because she cleaned or cooked, but because of the quiet strength she brought into the home. One evening, as he sat on the back porch, Ron came, out holding a letter. It's for you, he said. Keanu opened it. Inside was a simple handwritten note from Emilia. Dear Keanu, I got an A on my first big exam. I'm finally starting to believe I belong here. Thank you for being the first person who believed in me. I'll never forget that. Amelia, underneath the note was a photo, her and her two friends, standing in front of a university building, holding up peace signs. Keanu smiled, and for the first time in a long while, he felt something deep inside his chest shift. Not pride, not satisfaction, but hope. Because he had spent a lifetime playing heroes in movies. But in this small, real story, he had simply helped someone find their own. The question no one asked. 3 months had passed since Amelia stepped into her new life at the university. She had faced challenge after challenge, language barriers, cultural gaps, and a schedule that left her barely enough time to breathe. But through it all she had held on to a dream, held on to a promise, held on to the memory of someone who once placed a blanket over her shoulders without saying a word. And now, that memory gave her strength. On a cold Thursday morning, Amelia sat in the campus library, her notes spread out across the table. Her eyes were red from lack of sleep, but she kept writing, her hand moving steadily over the paper. Then came the message, a simple text from Clara. Turn on the campus news. Now. Amelia pulled out her phone and clicked the link Clara had sent. There, on screen, was her own face. A student-run program had just aired a short documentary titled From Broom to Books, The Maid Who Became a Scholar. The reporter had dug into her background and shared her journey, from the maid working late shifts in a Hollywood mansion, to the student now earning top grades at a major university. Amelia's heart raced. She hadn't given them permission. She hadn't even known they were working on it. But as she listened, her fear gave way to something else because they hadn't mocked her. They hadn't twisted her story. They had honored it. The voiceover ended with, what started as a quiet act of kindness by one man became the loudest example of what belief can do. Keanu Reeves saw the clip the same evening. A friend had forwarded it to him without saying a word. He watched it alone, on his living room couch, eyes locked on the screen. When it ended, he sat in silence. Then slowly, he smiled. She made it, he whispered. But deep down, he also knew. The real journey was just beginning. By the next week, everything changed again. Reporters reached out. TV producers called the university. Some wanted to turn her story into a full-length documentary. Others offered paid speaking gigs. Amelia was overwhelmed. She wasn't ready for fame. She didn't want a spotlight. She just wanted to learn. She called Keanu that night, for the first time in weeks. I don't know what to do, she said. Then don't rush, he replied. You don't owe anyone your story, only yourself, she paused. But they're offering money, and exposure, and pressure, he added. Remember, the best stories aren't the ones everyone knows. They're the ones that stay true. But pressure did come. One morning her professor pulled her aside. I heard about the documentary, he said. You're becoming a symbol. I didn't ask for that, she said. No one does, he replied. But sometimes life chooses you to carry a message. What you do with it, that's up to you. A few days later, Amelia was invited to speak at a youth leadership summit. It was a small event in the city, but the crowd would be full of students, educators, and community leaders. She almost said no. But then she remembered her younger self, alone, tired, hidden, in a back room with nothing but a second-hand lamp and a broken dream. Maybe someone out there needed to hear her voice. So she agreed. On the night of the event, she stood backstage trembling. Her knees felt weak. Her palms were wet. But then she looked out at the audience, rows of young faces waiting. She stepped forward. No script, no cue cards, just her truth. I wasn't born lucky, she began. I wasn't born into a family with money or power or even time. I was born into noise, into silence, into struggle. She paused, her voice shaking. But one night I was caught studying at 2 a.m. And instead of being punished, I was seen. The room was still. Sometimes all a person needs is a little space, a little belief, and someone to tell them, you can. She shared her journey, her fear, her small victories, her failures, and most of all, Her gratitude. 2. The man who gave me a desk, a lamp, and silence. Thank you. You taught me that real power doesn't shout, it listens. When she stepped off stage, the room erupted in applause. Not for a celebrity, not for a success story, but for someone real. Someone like them. The clip of her speech went viral. Again, but this time, something was different. People didn't just praise her, they started sharing their own stories. A janitor who had returned to college at 42. A single mother who studied during her lunch breaks. A refugee who passed his bar exam after working nights for 5 years. The hashtag, #AziNersiri, I believe in you, started trending, and Amelia knew. This wasn't just her story anymore. It was everyone's. Keanu called her a few days later. You've started something, he said. I didn't mean to. That's the best kind, he replied. Then, he added, have you ever thought of starting a foundation? She hesitated. I wouldn't know how. Then let me help. And so they built it together. They called it Late Lights, a small nonprofit focused on helping night workers, maids, janitors, servers, security guards, pursue education through small scholarships, tutoring support, and emotional guidance. They started small, just 10 people, then 20, then 100, each one with their own story, each one carrying a silent dream. And Amelia wrote letters to every single one, by hand. The first sentence always said the same thing, I see you. But even as the foundation grew, Amelia stayed humble. She kept attending classes, kept studying late into the night. And sometimes, when she was tired, she'd read the old letter Keanu had written on that first desk in the guest room. Keep studying. I believe in you. She kept it in her drawer, folded neatly. Because belief never expires. One afternoon, Clara came running into the dorm, breathless. Amelia, come see this. They ran to the common room where Amin was setting up the TV. It's an interview, he said. Your name is in it. On screen, Keanu Reeves sat in a quiet studio being interviewed by a journalist. The topic was his work off-screen. The journalist leaned in and asked, Can you tell us about someone who's changed your life? Keanu thought for a moment, then said, Her name is Amelia. She worked in my home, but she taught me more than any script ever did. The interviewer raised an eyebrow. How? Keanu smiled. Because she reminded me that heroes don't always wear costumes. Sometimes they wear aprons, and sometimes they don't need saving, they just need someone to open a door. Tears filled Amelia's eyes. Not from pride, not from shock, but from a quiet knowing. She hadn't walked this path alone, and now she would do everything she could to keep those doors open for others. That night, she sat at her desk and wrote in her notebook. One sentence. Short, simple, true. Every dream deserves its chance. The storm she didn't see coming. Amelia stood under the soft glow of a street lamp just outside the campus library, her breath forming tiny clouds in the cold night air. Her coat was thin, but she didn't notice the chill. She had just finished tutoring 3 students in English grammar. One of them had hugged her tightly and said, You make me feel smart. Those words echoed inside her chest as she walked slowly back to her dorm. When she entered, Clara was waiting by the door holding a phone. You need to see this, Clara said, her voice tight. Amelia took the phone and looked at the screen. A headline stared back at her. The Maid with a Fake Dream? Shocking claims about viral student. Her heart dropped. She opened the article. Someone claiming to be from her old neighborhood had written a blog post filled with lies. They said she had made up her struggles, that she came from a rich family back home, that she used Keanu Reeves to gain sympathy and fame. Her hands went cold. There were fake screenshots, twisted stories, anonymous comments. Hundreds of them. Some were angry, others were cruel. She's an actor just like him, another attention seeker. She tricked everyone. Amelia felt dizzy. This isn't true, she whispered. We know that, Clara said gently. But the internet didn't wait for truth. By morning, the story had spread. Some people defended her. Others turned on her. The media called it the scholarship scandal, and Amelia, who had once felt like she was finally becoming someone, now felt like she was disappearing again. She didn't go to class, she didn't check her email, she didn't answer her phone. She sat on her bed with her arms wrapped around her knees, trying not to cry. But the tears came anyway. She thought of going home. She thought of quitting everything. But then there was a knock on the door. Soft, steady. She opened it slowly. Keanu stood there, not with cameras, not with security, just himself, in a gray sweater holding a small bag of takeout. "I brought noodles," he said gently. She blinked, stunned. "How did you—" "Clara called me." They sat on the floor together, silent at first. Then he asked, "You okay?" "No," she said honestly. "Do you want to quit?" She nodded, then shook her head. "I don't know." He leaned back against the wall. "When I was younger, a tabloid said I had a secret child and was hiding millions in a fake trust. It was all lies. But people believed it anyway." Amelia looked at him, surprised. "So what did you do?" "I waited. I let the truth breathe, because lies need noise to survive. Truth doesn't." She didn't answer. Just let the words settle. "You've helped people," he continued. "Real people. You've started something that matters. Don't let a lie steal that from you." "But I'm tired," she whispered. "Then rest. But don't stop." Over the next few days, Amelia stayed offline. Keanu's lawyer sent a statement to the press, calmly defending her with facts and documents. Her scholarship records, her application essays, her visa paperwork. None of it was fake. The lie began to fall apart. The person who had posted the article was exposed, someone she had turned down for help weeks earlier, a bitter voice hoping to tear her down for attention. But by then, the damage had been done. Even though the truth came out, something inside Amelia had changed. She no longer trusted the quiet. She no longer felt safe in classrooms or coffee shops. Whispers followed her. Stares made her shrink. She smiled less, laughed rarely, until one afternoon she visited Late Lights, the nonprofit she and Keanu had started. And there, sitting on the floor, were 4 young women, reading books together. One of them looked up and said, "Are you Amelia?" She nodded. "You made me believe I could apply to nursing school," the girl said. "My mom's a housekeeper. We never thought we could dream like this." Amelia's throat tightened. "You're the reason I'm even here," the girl added. In that moment, something broke and healed at the same time. Amelia knelt down, hugged the girl, and whispered, "Thank you for reminding me." Later that week, Keanu took her for a walk through a quiet garden in the hills. The sky was overcast, the breeze soft. He carried a camera in his hand, snapping photos of trees, flowers, moments. "I used to take photos when things got loud," he said. "It helped me see the world clearly." Amelia looked at the trees around her, still unsure. "How do I move forward when I feel like I've already fallen?" Keanu took a picture of her standing in the light. "You don't move forward all at once," he said. "You take one step, then another, and eventually you're somewhere new." Amelia returned to school the next day. Her hand still shook. Her eyes still searched faces for judgment. But she walked into the classroom anyway. She sat at her desk, opened her notebook, and began again. Some students smiled at her. Some didn't. But she didn't need everyone's approval anymore. She just needed her voice and her reason. By the end of the semester, Amelia had not only passed her courses, she had earned the highest grade in her education class. Her professor pulled her aside and said, "You have a gift for teaching. Don't ever let the world convince you otherwise." And for the first time in months, Amelia believed it. Keanu visited less now. He wanted her to grow without leaning too much on him. But every month, without fail, he sent her a postcard. Sometimes with quotes, sometimes with poems. Once it just said, "You are not the story others tell about you. You are the story you choose to write." She kept them all in a small wooden box, and when nights got hard again, she opened that box and read them, one by one. Months later, she received an email from an international education conference. They had heard about late lights, and her story. They invited her to speak on a panel about youth empowerment and access to education. She said yes, not for the spotlight, not for redemption, but for the girl who once studied at 2 a.m. with a flickering lamp and a dream too heavy for one heart to carry alone. At the conference, she stood before hundreds of educators and leaders. She didn't bring notes. She didn't rehearse. She just spoke. They said I was a maid, she began, and they were right. But they forgot to add, I was also a student, and a dreamer, and a daughter, and now I am a teacher in the making. She paused. What we call people matters, but how we treat them matters more. Her voice didn't rise, but the room went silent. And then, a single person stood and clapped. Then another, and another, until everyone stood. Not because she was famous, but because she was brave and real and unshaken. The lesson they didn't expect spring arrived with soft breezes and blooming flowers across the university lawn. Birds returned to the trees and students sprawled across benches and grassy hillsides with books in their hands and laughter in the air. Amelia walked quietly through campus, holding a binder full of lesson plans. She had been assigned her first practicum, a chance to teach real students in a classroom. It wasn't just an assignment, it was her dream in motion. She remembered her younger self, struggling to pronounce words in English, afraid to speak in public, convinced she didn't belong. Now she was about to stand in front of a group of high schoolers and teach them how to write, how to read deeply, how to speak boldly. The teacher she was assisting, Mr. Lawrence, was kind, but firm. On her first day, he pulled her aside and said, "These kids come from tough homes, don't try to impress them. Just be real." Amelia smiled. Real is all I know. Her first lesson was shaky. Her voice trembled at the start. One boy whispered something and snickered. A girl in the back rolled her eyes, but she kept going. She taught them about personal essays, how to find their own stories. Your voice matters, she said, even if it's quiet, even if no one's ever listened before. The second day was better, and by the end of the week, one of the students handed her a folded note. You talk like you've lived what you're teaching. That makes me want to write. Amelia held that note in her hand for a long time, because she had lived it, and now she was passing it on. Meanwhile, back at Late Lights, the foundation was growing faster than anyone expected. Keanu worked behind the scenes, connecting donors and partners, while Amelia led the storytelling team, recording stories from night workers who had been given a second chance, janitors, dishwashers, bus, drivers, maids. Each of them had a dream, and each of them had a new path because of what she started. At one of their events, a woman approached Amelia holding a baby. I was working nights cleaning offices, the woman said. Then your team helped me enroll in nursing school. I just passed my exams, and this is my daughter. Her middle name is Amelia. Amelia couldn't hold back tears, not because of pride, but because of the weight of what kindness can do. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills, Keanu invited Amelia to his home for dinner. It had been over a year since she left. Stepping back into that house felt like walking into a memory. Everything looked the same, but everything felt different. She noticed a framed photo on a shelf, a picture of her giving her first speech at the youth summit. She hadn't known he had it. You've kept that? She asked, surprised. Of course, he said. It reminds me what matters. They ate outside on the patio. Soft music played from a speaker. The sky turned shades of pink and orange. Do you ever miss acting? She asked. Sometimes, he said. But these days, I prefer real stories. He looked at her. Like yours. They sat in silence for a moment. Not awkward, just full. You, no, he added. People used to call me the quiet one in Hollywood. But watching you taught me something. Quiet doesn't mean small. It means steady. It means strong. Amelia smiled. I used to think quiet meant invisible. It doesn't, he said. It means focused. The next morning, Amelia received a call from her professor. "We've nominated you," he said, "for the National Emerging Educator Award." She froze. "Me? Yes. Your practicum school sent glowing reviews. Your foundation work was mentioned too. We believe you're ready." Amelia sat down slowly. Her hands shook. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Thank you." Then she picked up her pen. Because the story was still being written, as part of the award process, she was asked to submit a recorded message. Most people gave long speeches full of teaching philosophy and classroom strategy. Amelia's message was short. "I was once a maid who studied at 2 a.m., she said, looking into the camera. "Now I help others find their light in the dark. I don't teach because I know everything. I teach because I know how it feels to be unseen." The video went viral. Again. But this time, no scandal followed. Just support and love. And stories from all around the world. A man in Argentina who used her message to go back to school at 55. A teenage girl in India who translated her video for classmates. A janitor in Texas who printed the transcript and taped it to his locker. Amelia had once been afraid of attention. Now, she used it to amplify others. The award ceremony was held in a grand theater in New York. Keanu flew in quietly, wearing a black suit, sitting in the third row with no camera on him. When Amelia's name was called, she stepped onto the stage in a simple navy blue dress and steady hands. She looked out at the crowd and began, "I never expected to be here. I didn't even expect to finish school." She told them about the night she was caught studying, how she thought she'd be scolded, but instead someone believed in her. She paused, then said, "You don't have to be a star to light the way for someone. You just have to be kind. And pay attention." The crowd stood in applause. Keanu stayed seated, smiling, because he knew this wasn't about him anymore. It never really had been. It was about her, her journey, her voice, her choice to keep going. After the ceremony, she found him backstage. They didn't speak right away, just hugged, tight, grateful, alive. "What now?" he asked. She looked at him, eyes full of fire. "Now, we find more people in the dark." The spark that never faded. Years passed. Not quickly, not all at once, but quietly, like sunlight slipping through curtains. Amelia's life was no longer a story whispered in university halls or shared online. It had become something deeper, something lived, not just told. She became a teacher, a real one. In a classroom filled with laughter and questions and messy notebooks, she taught English. But more than that, she taught courage. She told her students that stories could save lives, that no one's voice was too small. And sometimes she told them a little about her own story, but only when they needed it most, when a student felt invisible, or scared, or stuck. And in those moments, she wasn't a former maid or a viral sensation. She was just Miss Amelia, the teacher who saw them, the way someone once saw her. Late lights continued to grow. The small foundation she and Keanu had started from a corner desk in a guest room became something global. They offered scholarships in over 20 countries, created study spaces in night shelters, built a mobile library that visited communities where silence was often mistaken for hopelessness. They didn't just give money. They gave belief, and each project began the same way, with a question, "What are you dreaming of at 2 a.m.? Keanu took a quieter role. He still visited schools sometimes, spoke at a few events, and helped raise funds. But mostly, he stayed behind the curtain. Because that's how he liked it. And because, in his heart, he knew the best part of his story had already been written. In a house where a girl studied late at night thinking no one noticed. One summer, Amelia was invited to speak at the United Nations. The topic, education and dignity in unseen communities. She stood at the podium in a simple white blouse and black skirt, her voice calm and clear. "Dignity," she said, "does not come from job titles or bank accounts. It comes from being seen, respected, believed in." She told them about the power of one moment, one hallway, one choice, I was once cleaning floors in silence. Now I teach children to speak loudly, not with their volume, but with their hearts. The delegates stood. Some wiped tears. Others simply nodded. Because truth doesn't need translation. That same night, in a quiet corner of New York, Keanu watched the replay on his laptop. He paused the video just before she finished her speech and whispered, "You did it." And though the world didn't hear him, he meant every word. After the UN event, Amelia returned home, not to a mansion, not to a red carpet, but to a small cottage near a school she loved. She planted herbs in the garden, wrote poetry on Sunday, mornings, sometimes. She still woke up at 2 a.m., not to study, but to dream bigger. On the 5-year anniversary of Late Lights, Keanu sent her a gift, a single page, framed. It was the original note he had written on her study desk long ago. "Keep studying. I believe in you." Beneath it, he added something new. And now, they believe too. Amelia placed it on her desk, next to a candle, next to a picture of her mother smiling, next to a small figurine of a girl sitting under a lamp. She didn't need reminders anymore, but she liked them, because some stories never fade. One evening, as she was leaving her classroom, she found a student sitting alone near the window, a book open on their lap. Amelia sat beside them. "Late night?" she asked. The student nodded. "I want to get into a good college, but I don't think I'm smart enough." Amelia didn't smile. She didn't tell them it would be easy. She simply said, "Once, I thought the same thing. And then someone left a light on for me." She handed them a notebook. Empty, waiting. "Start here," she whispered. "I'll leave the light on." Across the city, Keanu sat at his desk, flipping through handwritten letters from scholarship students. He paused at one line from a boy in Kenya. "Thank you for showing the world that maids, janitors, and drivers can dream too." He folded the letter slowly, looked out the window and closed his eyes. Not in sadness, but in peace. Because this story, the one that began in silence, had become something much louder, not with noise, but with purpose, and love, and light.